Chatterjee. Amit Chatterjee has completed his graduate studies from USD in 2015 and has done his post-graduation from D.Y. Patil College of Architecture in 2017. He is currently a PhD scholar in Veer Surendra Sai University of Technology in Odisha, where he currently works as the assistant professor. He has agreed to conduct this workshop with us today in three parts, today and the following 2 Mondays. We are honored to have you here with us, sir. And on behalf of SVS SOA, I welcome you to this workshop. Now, uh, sir, if you please.
Okay, thank you so much, Rohit, for the kind introduction. And good morning, ma'am. Thank you so much for the opportunity that you have given me uh, to conduct this particular basics of photography workshop. So, good morning to all of you, and welcome to the photography workshop. Basically, this course will be shared. I'll just once let me check. Is my screen visible to all? If you can confirm.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So basically, this course will be introduction to photography, where we will be talking about various aspects of photography and various genre of photography that's there. Then when we talk about the next module, we'll be talking about few more things, which are the technicalities of photography. And then we will talk about at the end about the compositional skills and the skills that you require to conduct yourself as a photographer. So just a fun fact to know why photography is so important and why the craze has come in. Did you know that 1.2 trillion photographs were taken in 2017? Just in 2017, 1.2 trillion. That's more than added the whole history of photography right from 1820s. So the photography media, the urge to share photographs has become really famous these days. People are sharing about it, and even the technicalities, the technology has developed where you have social medias and things like that, where you can share so much. That is also encouraging the people to take photographs. Every day around 95 million photographs and videos are shared on Instagram, just on Instagram as a social media. And surprisingly, the smartphone, before it used to be like, if you have a DSLR, people used to at least look at you or regard you as a photographer. But these days, the most famous media of taking photograph is just in your pocket. That's the smartphone. And you'll be surprised to know in 2017, 2018, out of the major photography awards that have been awarded, around 80% of the time, the photographs have come out of just mere smartphone and not any super DSLR. So that's one fun fact for you. So if you do not own a DSLR, doesn't mean that you cannot have photography. It doesn't mean you cannot conduct photography. I'll tell you about the different cameras and lenses and things like that. Those are technical, but they are not required to get yourself into photography. What you require is the passion to click images, to how do you say, celebrate images. So you require the passion for that. You need the view and you need to look at the world like that. That is what is required for photography, and not a DSLR. So that's one thing. So the basic photography this course that we'll be conducting, I have kind of divided it into three modules. The first module will talk about just the introduction of photography that we are going to do today. So it will talk about different genres, and since I have seen your syllabus which comes from journalism to photography, so we will talk about journalism in brief. Then we will touch upon what exactly is photography. Then we'll touch upon what is the combination that is creating photography and journalism as photojournalism. And then we will come down to our field of expertise, that's architecture. So we will talk about what exactly is architectural photography, and then we will talk about few of the famous works of architectural photographers around the world, and try to learn what exactly are the things, the tricks and turns they use that makes their photographs so so versatile and so nice. The second module that we'll be doing next Monday will be talking about the mechanics of photography. Now, the mechanics of photography gets a little technical. It talks about cameras, it talks about lenses, then it also talks about the exposure triangle. Now, when we talk about it, you will know what exactly is the exposure triangle. But basically, it will talk about the ISO, the shutter speed, the aperture, learning how to control the light, understanding how what kind of photography and what kind of settings do you require in your camera. Maybe your smart camera, these days even smartphone cameras have manual mode. So basically making yourself independent from the autofocus style that we are used to when we are taking photographs. We just go auto and we click it. Now we will be in this second module, you will be learning how to control the camera rather than the camera controlling you. So it won't be the camera which will give you what it wants you to see. Rather, it will be you who would like to see what you want the camera to capture. And the third module will be the most important module. That's the rules of photography. Basically, it's a very vague concept of saying rules of photography, because to be honest, some of the best photographs come out when people actually break the rules. But having said that, you need to learn the rules to break the rules. So we will talk about the principle of composition. Some of them you have already studied, I am sure. Since we are talking about architectural background, uh, we all must have read about Francis D. Kitching's form, space, and order. And believe me, half of the photography principles comes just out of just normal principles of design. Talk about symmetry, repetition, things like that. We will talk about that. Then there are certain rules that and laws of photography that are completely for photography only in that domain. And so that's like rule of third. Then we are talking about golden proportion and use of light and shadow and understanding the principles, just like that. So that's my story. I'll be taking this. So I have graduated from UST Mysore in 15, and 17 I did my master's. Currently, I am working as an assistant professor. Uh, so let's get started with the introduction to photography. That will be our module 1 today. Uh, the first thing that when we talk about photography, the first thing that we need to learn is what is it that you want to photograph? What exactly is it that you want to photograph? There are different genres of photography. There are different styles of photography. And when we talk about the genres and style, there are certain things that click us the more, that we want to experiment that particular kind of photography more. So there are portrait photography. Some of you might be really interested into portrait photography. Some of you might really get into wildlife photography. Some of you might actually have your interest in architectural photography. So one thing that you have to keep asking yourself is what exactly you want to photograph, or what do you enjoy photography. So this is one thing that you have to keep in mind throughout this entire course, so that by the end of this course, you know, okay, fine, this is something that I want to really get into. So we will talk about the module. As I said, we will talk about the camera basics, we'll talk about the lenses, we'll talk about the mechanics of photography, such as shutter speed, which controls the motion and the movement of a thing. Then we talk about aperture, which will be controlling the light and depth of light. We will talk about this as a technical in module 2. We will talk about perfect exposure and what exactly exposure means, what kind of how do you say, what kind of lighting do we require so that we can call a particular picture as a perfect exposure, and we know that it's not underdone or it's not overdone. And then this will be the module 2 final thing, which will be the full manual mode and taking control of your camera. Then the third module talks about the composition. So what is photography? Now, when we talk about photography, there are multiple definition for it. A psychology of photography is different. Someone from physics will define photography as a different field. The definition will differ. Someone from art field will define the photography as a complete different definition. That definition will differ. The basic definition that we can keep, we can tell ourselves is basically three things in a photography. That's light, that's time, and that's a light sensitive material. In our case, we call it a sensor. So basically, a photography is nothing but a combination of light taken at a particular time and recorded by a light sensitive diode, and sometimes we call it as, these days we call it as a sensor. Light, time, sensor, that's all photography is all about, if you want to have a general definition for all of the field together. Now if you go into photo physics, they will talk about how to capture light with a certain amount of temperature, this, that. When you talk about art, they will talk about how to capture the emotion of a particular space within a frame. So the definition varies from person to person, from field to field, but one definition that binds all of it together is light, time, and sensor. These three things is all photography is all about. And if you keep this thing in mind, then you will be having a complete open mind towards this entire domain, and it will be helping you rather than getting into this complicated definitions. Now, the same thing that I talked about, light, time, and sensor, or a light sensitive material, is turned or is read in photography as an exposure triangle of photography, which talks about again light, time, and sensitivity. The light of that particular object is measured in aperture, the time is measured in ISO, and the sensitivity, the fastness, and things like that will be measured in shutter speed. So three things that are the key to photography will be: one, aperture; another, ISO; and another, shutter speed. So three things that will actually bind the whole photography mechanics together, and this is called as the exposure triangle of the photography. So when we are talking about this terminologies in detail, like aperture, ISO, and shutter speed, we will be talking about that in the module 2, and I'll explain you how to read this particular diagram. Like what is there on your left is the diagram known as exposure triangle, and we will tell you how to read it, so that by knowing this particular diagram, you will know at what time of the day, or at what time, what should be your camera control to take this kind of photograph, or to take a ideal photograph which will be, appreciated by all. Now before we get into the photography, let's talk about what are the camera types that we have, because this is also a very technical terminology that we use, camera types, and we need to know the different kind of cameras. Now today we have more or less, you can say, 6 to 7 kind of camera that we use the most. Smartphone or camera being the most how do you say, popular one, the one we use the most. Back in the days when I was teaching, I was studying in USD, and there was a photography course, and we had nothing but a compact camera. So that's the camera. You must have seen this around probably 10 years, 8 years ago. This was one of the most famous when smartphone cameras were not developed. But these days, smartphone cameras has taken up. The camera style, the improvement in the camera, and the sensor, improvement in the sensor, the capability that a smartphone camera can do has actually taken over the compact cameras. That is why the popularity of compact cameras has actually gone down, and you don't see compact cameras so much. The next kind of camera that we talk about is called large sensor compact camera. Now they are the same thing, but their sensor is large. Now understand, when we talk about sensor, that means their capability of you can say recording or absorbing light. So the larger sensor you have, the better the camera is. That means the better the how do you say, camera capability of capturing the image is. So uh, when you look at it, the smartphone cameras has the smallest sensor, although these days their sensors are almost competing with compact cameras, then compact cameras, then large sensor. So when you see this entire thing, the sensor area in each of these cameras are gradually increasing, and that is what is making the particular device a versatile device. The next kind of camera that we talk about is bridge cameras. Now these are very famous cameras. You must have seen people who are more into traveling using this bridge cameras, who do not want to get into the technicalities too much, but just wants a crisp image, better than smartphone, but not into the DSLR and carrying lenses and things like that. Basically, if you want to keep your life easy, you can go for a bridge camera. So bridge camera talks about basically has a wide range. It's all-in-one camera. When you talk about bridge camera, it's basically a all-in-one camera. It talks about various things. Let's say, for example, if you want to click a certain kind of specialized image, you might need a specialized lens for a DSLR camera. But a bridge camera can do it all. It has a macro mode which can do macro photography. It has a sports mode which can do sports photography. It has a night mode which can take photographs at night. So basically, it's an all-in-one camera. The demerit, however, is that a bridge camera do not have the capability of changing a lens. So it's how do you say? Its advantage is its disadvantage. The camera is very versatile, and the disadvantage is it does all but nothing to the perfect. So bridge camera is still one of the most how do you say, popular kind of camera that we use today. One good thing about bridge camera is bridge camera will have a really nice zoom. So basically, what we can do in a DSLR with a 400 or 600 lens, which costs almost like lakhs together, a bridge camera can have that. Although the resolution will vary, but if you want to capture something really far, a bridge camera can do that. So that's bridge camera. Then we move on to the next thing, which is known as DSLR and mirrorless camera. Now, when we talk about DSLR, that's one of the I can say one of the most common terminology that we use. And anyone who's holding a DSLR, before it used to be a fact that we used to identify a photographer by knowing whether he is having a DSLR or not, which is so not true, because photography is way more than the equipment that you use. But DSLR is a kind of camera that you can change the lens, the same with mirrorless camera. The only two differences between a mirrorless camera and a DSLR camera is mirrorless camera doesn't have a mirror inside, and DSLR has. So when we talk about in the module 2 the entire working of camera, then I'll explain when I'll show you a section through the camera, and you'll understand that there is a mirror which reflects the light to the sensor, and that particular mirror is there in DSLR and it is not there in mirrorless cameras. Having said that, mirrorless camera and DSLR cameras are almost same in terms of all the other possibilities, all the other capabilities it has. A mirrorless camera can cost you way more than a DSLR camera sometimes, because this is what is the call of today. Mirrorless cameras are getting popular day by day because it's slimmer, it has the same kind of capability, and it can do, sometimes better than DSLR cameras. So yeah, mirrorless camera and DSLR camera. There is one more kind of camera that we do not see usually. It's called as a pro DSLR cameras, and they cost about 20 15 lakhs together. So those are the cameras that's only specialized people use it, and you do not see it in general. So basically, when you look at the whole palette of camera in and around us in the society today, you will see it from a smartphone camera to a DSLR camera and all of the camera we spoke about in between them. So it depends on you which one you have. But as I said, for this particular course, any of these cameras will do. You do not need a particular specialized DSLR or a full frame DSLR or a really expensive camera to do photography. You can do it just with your phone. As I said, some of the best international photography awards have been awarded to people who have taken photographs, who have taken beautiful photographs with just smartphone. And it's easy because you do not carry your DSLR all the time, but you carry your phone all the time, so you do not miss out on the moments. So if there is something which is a really nice moment, the phone camera does give you the liberty to click it right away, whereas DSLR you have to change the settings and things like that and then click. So a smartphone camera will just do fine. Now that we have spoken about cameras, now let's understand what are the ways that we want. And let's try to understand what exactly is your way that you want to do the photography in. Now, when we talk about, this is where we are talking about the genres of photography. Now, when we talk about the genres of photography, there are many, and these days some genres are adding up to the palette of photography. But when we consider a wholesome photography, the whole principles of photography and the whole history of photography, we will see a total number of 8 to 7 kind of photography genres that are available today. And one of the most important, or you can say one of the most famous one that we all started our photography with, just is landscape. So these are the photographs that I am talking about, and the photographers' names are written right on the below bottom right hand corner. So you can look at the photographer name and you can follow them also. Those are the pioneers of those kind of photography. So if I'm talking about Ansel Adams, he is a pioneer of landscape photography, and these are his clicks. Um, so when we talk about landscape photography, what are we talking about? What is it that is making landscape photography so famous today, and why is everyone so crazy about landscape photography? The first thing is, this is the kind of photography which is a great way to explore your settings and become comfortable with your camera. So if you are starting up with your camera, if you want to start up with your photography, you should start with landscape, because number one, unlike wildlife photography, the subject that you have is not running away anywhere. It's right there. So you have your time, you have the liberty and the freedom to experiment with your camera, and you can actually focus and spend some time over there and take the best photograph and compare the photographs. So landscape is a best how do you say mode to start your photography with, rather than going into technical photographies like macro or sports photography. Landscape gives you that freedom to take your time and take photographs and then analyze them. The second thing, will it will teach you the patience while we wait for the right light, because as I said, both in architecture as well as in photography, light plays a key role. The light is gone, the whole essence of that particular domain is gone. So you must have seen there are landscape photographers who almost wait for days together to get into a perfect timing just to click a perfect kind of scenery. Now there are technical terminologies for that. There are pink hours, there are golden hours, there are blue hours. So basically golden hours is something you will get in the dawn, or you will get in the evening, just when the sun is about to set, somewhere around it depends again on season, which season you're talking about, because the winter the sun will set faster. So the golden hour will be comparatively somewhere around 4:30 to 5 o'clock, around that time. And in the summer it will be around almost like 5:30 to 6:15, somewhere around that time. And in the morning it will be somewhere around 4:30 to 5. So you have to wait for the right kind of light to click the particular area in the kind of time or in the kind of way that you want to take the photograph in that. So this kind of photography, you require a lot of patience. You cannot although these days with Photoshop you can do almost everything, but that is not what we are talking about. And also I discourage people from using too much of Photoshop to edit photographs, because that is not the whole sense of photography is. Some of the best photographs today from Robert Capa, or if you talk about Raghurai, has come out in the terms of black and white photograph when there was barely any editing capabilities available. So editing capabilities do not judge the kind of photographer you are. The photography and editing capabilities, those are completely two different fields. Do not confuse yourself. If someone is really editing a picture really nice, that means his post processing capabilities are really good, doesn't mean that he or she is a good photographer. So a photographer is someone who would use the least amount of post processing, or sometimes none at all. So yeah, think about the time of the day you go shooting, and light is best at the dawn and twilight. And as a rough guide, focus about one third into the scene to help you sharpness. So one third, when we talk about the third module, we will talk what exactly is one third of photography. I just told you about the one third rule, and we will discuss about that. So in landscape, one third rule plays a very important role. If some of you are noting down, just note down landscape and in bracket write one third rule, because that's one of the rule that you will be using almost every time when you are clicking landscape photography. And this is one misconception that we have, is landscape should look pretty. It's not the case. Actually, not all landscape have to be pretty. Sometimes landscape might, some of the best landscape are not so pretty to look at, but they, the motive of landscape is to transfer the feel of the space rather than transferring, how do you say, the aesthetics of a space. So sometimes the landscape might not look so appealing to look at, but that might be a really good landscape photography. So do not judge a photograph by the looks of how good it looks. It's not the criteria. Although for layman, for general public, we always think, a good photography is something when it looks very good, but that's not the case. And you will understand that difference when we talk about photojournalism. So that's coming up after this presentation. So then we will understand what exactly is the requirement, why do we photograph, and why, what is the, sometimes it's just hobby, but when you take it as a profession, what is it that you want to showcase, or what is it that your every click matters. So we will talk about that when we are talking about photojournalism. Just one thing, that it need not be pretty all the time. And as I said, for a landscape photography, you might have to dress yourself properly, because if you are going into the wilds and things like that, and a tripod is required, because that's a great investment if you want to have landscape photography, because you do not know what kind of condition will there be to take the photograph. The next genre of photography that we are going to talk about is called portrait photography. Now, this is one kind of photography that is most common these days, and a lot of people are attracted towards portrait photography. You see all the movie stars and things like their photographs, uh, and those are the example of portrait photography. In, how do you say, in a kind of way that they showcase the real character, or they showcase the real inner self of yours in a photograph. So now this is a photograph by Lisa Crescent. She is a, I take her as one of the best and most influential portrait photographer you can see today around the world. Um, she has taken photographs over, I don't know, maybe 150 or 160 countries. And the photographs that she clicks, or the photographs that she produces, are something that talks to you, something that communicates to you. And that is one of the most important factor in a portrait photography. If the photograph is communicating with you or not. You can, I mean, you can see a lot of photographs which are nice to look at. The person is nicely dressed and things like that. But until and unless it communicates with you, it may not be considered as a portrait, as a great portrait, because a great portrait is only when uh, it talks to you about the pain it has, or about the feeling it has. It might be a joy photography, it might be a sad photography, it might be a photograph that can make you cry, it can be a photograph that can make you laugh. The point is whether it's transferring that particular feeling from the photograph to you, yes or no. That is what makes it a great photograph. So this is one by Lisa Crescent, and she's a photographer from Germany. The next one is again, this is another photograph from Sebastio Salgados. And now we will talk about the technicalities of portrait photography. When we talk about the technicalities of portrait photography, the communication becomes the key. The subject that you have to, for which you are clicking the photograph, or who will be the subject of your photography, you need to communicate with that person to know that particular person. Until and unless you know the particular person, you do not know exactly what emotion do you want to capture in your photograph. So to know the story, and they, let's say for example, if I go to an old woman sitting in a sitting just beside the road, and I talk to her, I might have to talk to her for an hour to know. Sometimes, I mean, not all the time, but sometimes I might have to talk to her for hours to know what exactly is her story. And then all I have is one click, one photograph to explain everything that she has told me. And if now, imagine if I don't talk to her and I just click her as just a subject, I might do a good photography in terms of just the composition, but the feeling of the photograph will only come when I know the story behind it. It's just like how musicians, sometimes they need to understand the lyrics to give the particular feelings. It's the same way with photographs. You need to understand your subject to produce the best photographs. Some of the technical points being, always try to focus on their eyes. And actually, this is something that is not only for human photography but also for animals. Whenever we are creating portraits, always try to focus on their eyes. Some of the cameras today come with eye focus or auto eye focus. You can use that also, not a problem. It generally completely focuses on your eyes, and the rest of the particular posture gets blurred out. So basically, that is done because eyes of a particular person, when he is happy or when he is sad, communicates it in a much better way rather than you can do it with any other part of the body. So eyes always focus over there. And also understand to learn the shallow depth of field. Now, when we will talk about aperture, we will talk about what is a depth of field, or you can know it's known as DOF. Some of you might have also come across one thing known as bouquet. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have already come across that. Bouquet is basically when you focus on particular subject, the background gets blurred, and there will be these circles, these tiny circles, and they look really nice in the background. So that is called bouquet. Even that is a characteristics of shallow depth of field, which is a characteristics of aperture. So you need to understand to utilize light properly so that you can have your depth of field properly, and so that you can get a nice bouquet out of it. So these three things are related together. You can just write it down somewhere. It's aperture, shutter, depth of field, DOF, and then bouquet. So always consider the direction of the light when you're taking a photograph. When you're taking a portrait, you need to understand which way the direction of the light is, because if the light is coming right in front of you, it will give a different kind of portrait. If the light is behind you, it will give a different kind of portrait where you'll see just the silhouette of a person. If the light is from the right, or if the light is from the left, it will give you a different characteristics of the person. So you need to understand how to utilize your particular light properly, how to use it. Sometimes people do use artificial studio settings to get some kind of lighting, but generally if you are out in the street and you want to take photographs, or you want to take portrait photographs, you need to understand how to utilize your light properly. The next one is think about what you're trying to capture. A great photograph, a great portrait will reveal the person's character. So as I said, where do you want to focus? What do you want to communicate with a portrait? The portrait, just taking a photograph of a person, is not portrait. That might be a passport photograph. That's not a portrait. A portrait talks more than that. Sometimes there is one more thing that we use a lot, that's called candid photography. Something that we see these days, a lot of young guys using candid photographies as their Facebook DPs or their Instagram DPs. The whole point is to just look straight at the mirror, like just look straight at the camera like this and take a photograph, but they want to showcase the kind of mood they are in, or the kind of space that's around. So maybe they'll be somewhere looking somewhere else and laughing, or there will be maybe someone is laughing too hard, and that becomes a candid particular photograph. So yeah, candid photography is also something that you can explore while taking photographs. That is, clicking the photograph of a person in its true original form, where she or he is not posing for the photograph, but they are in their own comfort zone, and you're taking a photograph to showcase the inner self of them. That's all. So the next one is when you talk about portrait photography, this is one of the kind of photography which has the most potential to earn. So you can get into if there are a lot of portrait photographers who are into wedding photography, who are into fashion, beauty. So this portrait photography does open up a lot of field for you to explore later on. The next that we are talking about is sports and action, and this is one of the most dynamic photography genre that is there. These days sports and action photography are you know more valued, and amazingly they get famous rather than a good portrait photography. The reason is, you can see it in the particular photograph. It gives you a kind of chill when you look at sports photography, because the particular setting that the person is very dynamic. Now when we talk about dynamic photography, it talks about basically uh, the place you are in, the sports you are in, something that's moving really fast, something that thrills you. So in these photographs become famous very fast. One of the major reason for that is because the kind of setting it has does half the job for making the photographing, for making the photograph appealing. The setting that you are in, the place that you are in, that itself does half the job. Like look at this particular photograph that we are talking about. In this photography you can see the person is almost in middle of the waves. Now when you talk about this, the dynamics of the photograph itself says, wow, this place is so nice, or this has been such a nice particular photograph. Because you might be mountaining somewhere. Sometimes it might be just a car photography, even that's into sports photography. Cameras, these are the things that are becoming really popular these days. Now GoPros are the basically action cameras that are very tiny, and we can take it with us almost everywhere. So you are not really going across with a big DSLR camera to take photographs. You can basically go anywhere with it, and it helps you because you are not dependent on the camera about what exactly it is capturing. The next point is intense quick action and knowledge of shutter speed is required. Now, this we will talk about when we are talking about the mechanics of photography. What is shutter speed? How does it, how can a person utilize it? What kind of photography? But usually, because sports and action photographs are so dynamic and the action is happening so fast, it is required that we have a good amount of control over our shutter speed, because the shutter speed is the basic characteristics how fast your camera can actually respond, or how fast can it actually click the photograph. Now, these photographs are great to share on social media. As I said, the dynamics itself does half the job, and you get uh, too many likes into the photography just because of the kind of photograph that you're talking about. And semi-auto modes are useful here. Uh, we usually discourage people to use auto mode, and try to tell them to use manual mode as much as possible, because manual mode gives you the control over the camera. But when things are moving so fast, you might not be able to control all the aspects of a camera. So in that kind of situation, you might have to go for semi-auto modes, and that will help you to take the photograph the way you want it to. Telephoto lens. Now that is one more, how do you say, thing that we have to talk about when we are talking about lenses. But just to give you an idea, telephoto lens is basically the kind of lens which can reach a really far object by being over here. So if you want, basically in a layman's term, we call it as a zoom lens. So basically a lens which has a really good zoom is called as a telephoto lens. Now when you're talking about sports camera or action cameras, let's say for the camera that is for with the photograph that is already there on your screen, you might not be in the water at all. You might be at the somewhere in the store, and you are still taking the photograph which is almost making you feel as if you are inside the water. That is possible just because you have a telephoto lens. uh, the next thing is you need to start local. That means for a good action photography or a good sports photography, you might not have to go all the time to some certain place to take the photograph. You can start local, explore the places around you, see what are the activities that are happening. If some football match is going on, or if some rally is going on, or if some but one that point also, always check with the person in charge if photographing is allowed there before you start taking photographs, especially with the action and sports photography. The next one is very popular, is wildlife photography. This is one photograph by one of the best wildlife photographer I have seen in India, Ramaswamy, and she is really good with the photography that she takes. Over here now, this is a complete different ball game altogether. Here you require patience like no one else. Sometimes you must have seen wildlife photographers do wait in the jungle for possibly sometimes days together just to click a single photograph of a particular animal or a bird. That's because you the particular subject is not under your control. The particular subject moves, the particular subject behaves in its own according to its own whims and fancies. So you need to have the patience if you want to capture the particular subject the way you want it, where you want it to be, where what you want it to be doing at that particular time. You need a lot of patience. Just like sports photography, telephoto lenses are a big advantage over here. Let's say, for example, if you are clicking a tiger or if you are clicking a snake, you really don't want to go that close. There are two reasons for it. One is safety, of course, and the second reason is you do not want to invade in their comfort zone where they become aware that you somebody is there and then around, because in that way you will not be able to click the full natural form or the full natural photography of that particular animal or the bird. So you need to be away. Now if you have to be away but still want to get close shots, telephoto lens is the solution for that. The next one is you need to learn your subject behavior. Now this is one thing that I tell my students a lot of time. Some of them, those who are into wildlife photographer, do a little bit of research before you go for clicking. Sometimes a little bit of research can actually be a big boon or a big advantage. If you know the behavioral pattern analysis of a snake, or if you know what is the tiger usually does after combing or after licking itself, what does it do? Now, what does it do? Then you already know what is coming next. You know what the subject is going to do. So it's much easy for you to set yourself or to understand what kind of setup do you require to take the kind of photograph. So behavioral analysis or researching about the particular subject you want to click in wildlife is really important. You need to understand about how they behave, how they move. If it's a bird, when it's gonna fly, uh, uh, if it has just flown from somewhere, will it stay there or will it just fly away right away? So that you need a really fast shutter speed to just click it right the moment it lands. So there's a lot of things that technically that you have to be strong about if you want to take wildlife photography. As I said, you have to be quiet and you have to move slowly. You have to be downright and think of the time of the day that you want. Now, this also comes within the whole category of doing the research, because sometimes what happens that if you understand their pattern, behavior pattern, if you know that in the morning that the animals are going to come to drink water from the river, you can place yourself near the river all right, maybe before they come, so that you are already there, you know where they are going to come, and then you just click when they come. So it's required that you understand the behavior. Also it requires that you understand the timing. The best light is again in the early morning or towards the evening for clicking photographs of the animals. Then one suggestion that I give is before you go to the wildlife, because wildlife photography is actually a very expensive hobby. Um, and I say expensive hobby because of two things. Because one, uh, if you want to be out in the wild, you need to go to a, let's say, um, to a forest or to a scenic place. That will require a lot of traveling and staying and accommodation. That talks about a lot of money. Also the lens that you use in a wildlife photography are the telephoto lens, which are 600 you must have seen some wildlife photographers with huge lenses, 800 600 lenses. Those lenses are in lakhs. So it's a very expensive hobby to have wildlife photography. One thing that I suggest is if you want to really click, animals, do go to a zoo. Now, when I was in Mysore, when I was studying there, I was blessed that Mysore has the one of the best zoo I have seen in India. So it used to give me a lot of freedom to click photographs in the zoo because you have a lot of animals over there. And the only demerit is the cage because that comes, but with the technical knowledge you can also blur out the cage and take the animals. So yeah, that is one thing that you need to know. If you have a zoo somewhere nearby in Coimbatore, you should visit that, and you can try out with less expensive stuff. Also you can try out wildlife photography. Now, this is one more thing that's becoming famous day by day. These days, this particular kind of photography has become really famous, and it's known as food and product photography. Now, this is something that when we talk about, uh, let me first tell you that food and product photography is not to show off what you are eating. A lot of us actually get into that, and a lot of us, including myself, I before we eat, we take a photograph, we post it on Instagram. We want our friends to know what we are eating, sometimes to make them jealous also. So, but the whole point when you come to the professional part of the photography, the whole point of food and product photograph is to sell the project or to sell the product. So let's say talking about KFC or McDonald's or um, any commercial food and product company, and you want to take photographs for them, their whole point is how to sell the product. Now for that, also you need to be patient because nobody wants to see a product just as it is. That's not attractive. You need to make it attractive. Let's say, for example, this particular photograph over there on your screen, the chocolate sauce itself, the characteristics of the chocolate sauce is so vivid that you really want to dip your finger right away and lick it off. So that's what a food or a product photography should do to you. It should get you to like it and maybe to utilize it, or if it's a food, to eat it. So for that, again, you need to be patient. You need to understand your subject. What do you want to show? Let's say, for example, you must have seen when Domino's advertises its cheeseburger pizza. The best thing they do is they showcase you by tearing the pizza, and the cheese will be melting out. So that kind of makes you, wow, okay, fine, I wish I had the pizza right now. So they understood the subject. They knew what will attract you, or they knew what is it that you want to see in that. Hence they captured that particular thing, and because of which, again, that was a successful click. So one good thing about this is the subject isn't running anywhere. Like wildlife photography, the subject might be gone after some time. In food photography or product photography, the subject just lies there, so you can take photograph. And you can go macro. Now macro is another genre of photography that we'll be talking about just right after this. And this talks about when you go really close, or when you go really into some kind of object and take photographs that are not usually visible to the naked eyes. So that is called macro photography. You can mix up a lot of angles, and surprisingly phones are a great type of instrument for taking such kind of photography, because since phones are so handy, you can actually go really close to the subject. Until and unless, unlike you, if you have a DSLR, you might need a specialized lens which is known as the macro lens to go really close. But phones, one, it is always with you. It's very convenient to take the photographs anytime, anywhere you want, and you can go really close with it. So you can do a lot of angle experiments to take out which angle is actually giving the photography, or is actually giving the product its the attention that it requires. So that's the kind of photography. Now I just focused on food, but you can focus on product photography also. It can be a selfie, can go into food or product seen a movie called Baby's Day Out, you would have seen the newborn photography where parents
Sir, you're muted.
Yes, now it's shared.
Okay. So when we are talking about newborn photography, now the whole point of the photography is the parents wants the photographer to click photographs of their kid in its or you know, in its candid moments, you can say, where the person wants to capture the innocence of the photograph of the subject. Now, this is one of the very iconic newborn photography from Agnes Geddes. She is a photographer from France. And if you look at it, now, when you talk about the technicalities of a newborn photography, the major thing that comes is two things. One is light, and second is the communication. Light is important in this kind of photography, is because you need to understand that you do not hurt or you do not take out the kid from his comfort zone by using a strong flash or by using a light which is not very ambient. You might actually disturb the baby, because of which you might not even able to get the click that you actually want to. And the second thing is to spend some time with the baby and get comfortable. Now, these are very sensitive subjects. Sensitive in the sense they can get really cranky at times, and they can give you the best shots at time. And the best thing that you can do is get comfortable. Um, do not take them out of their comfort zone. If possible, visit their place rather than to getting them to your studio. And avoid harsh light, mainly harsh light with the especially when you're taking portrait photographs of the babies. You should not be using it, because they are very sensitive to such kind of thing. They're just going to close the eyes, or they're going to just react in a way, maybe sometimes they might start crying. So then the whole setup, the whole mood of the place is gone, and you'll never get the photograph that you want to. So you have to spend some time with them. It's best when the shoots are very playful and fun. You get the best of the newborn photography shots over there. And you can always conduct yourself with a small studio. You must have seen in some studios they have this small white umbrellas which actually diffuses light. So you can take them, and you do not need a very big setup to take newborn photography. You can do it with the basics that you have. The next I was right now talking about is macro photography. Now, in macro photography, what happens is you take photographs and you showcase the details of the photograph that are not actually visible to the clear eye, and that is what the advantage or the X factor of macro photography is that you really get into the photograph. Uh, for example, this particular photograph or the next one over here, what's there on your screen, you can see the one thing about macro photography is it's a very technical area. Until and unless you have a really good control or command over your camera, you might not be able to do it. Um, just having the best of the best DSLR or just having the best of the best macro lens doesn't guarantee, or it won't guarantee that you will get a really good macro shot until and unless you understand the subject properly. One thing you must have seen me or must have heard me repeating again and again is understanding the subject, because no matter what you are clicking, whether you are clicking something living or dead, male, female, newborn, adult, anything, until and unless you understand the subject, you will not be able to do justice to the photograph. It's just photography is a kind of art form. It's just like artist. Until and unless you feel for it, you might not be able to click. So special lenses are needed for this kind of photography. Although these days cameras, smartphones have macro mode into it, you can really go close, super zoom mode into it. You can go close and take photographs, and it's good because the macro photography are really, how do you say, um, getting famous these days is because it is showcasing things that are not seen to us, and because of which we get excited by looking at it. Let's say, for example, if we talk about this particular photograph, just because we can see those tiny rings in that particular snail, we are getting excited, and we are maybe giving some more seconds more look to it rather than we would have given a normal snail photography or a normal photograph of a snail. So here, because of the details, because of the petals and the rings on the petals and things like that, you are getting attracted towards it. That's what macro photography does. That's the characteristics of a macro photography. Now finally we come to the photography that is in our domain, that's architecture photography. Now one good thing about it is you already have the eye for it. Let's say, for example, if you had when I by the meaning of eye for it, I mean when you talk about wildlife photography, or when you talk about macro photography, or when you talk about nuance photography, you might have to learn certain things. You might have to adapt yourself. You might have to learn about the subject before you start clicking. You might have to research, experiment something. The advantage with us architects or architecture students is that we already are into this field, so we know exactly what we want, so the base work is already done. uh, Now this is one genre of photography that I'll go a little detail into so that you understand what exactly is it. When we talk about architecture photography, it's basically not just photographing the building. If it's just about photographing the building, anyone can do it. It's about photographing the feel of that particular building, the sense of that particular building. And how do we do that is through light and shadow effect. 90% of the time you will see architecture photographs are all most of the architecture photographers, their favorite mode is black and white while taking photographs of architecture. And that is also because black and white photographs represent the color and shadow, sorry, the light and shadow in the most effective way rather than any other uh, modes of photography. The color does take your eyes away from the saturation to the hues to the contrast and things like that. But when it comes to black and white photography, it talks about the light and light, nothing else. So that is important in architecture as well. That is why a lot of architecture photographers, they use black and white as the mode of their photography when they're clicking architecture. Having said that, there are a lot of photographers that actually take photographs, beautiful photographs for the commercial uses. And this is one photograph by Ivan Ban, and he is one of the most, how do you say, iconic photographers from architecture photography point of view today. And his photographs, when we go through it, we'll be going through certain kind of photography, and you will see the kind of principles that he uses. So basically, it is lot less dynamic, not like sports photography where something is moving or things like that. Here, the photographs just Here the object just sits there and everyone looks at it. The challenge increases because everyone is already looking at it. What more do you have to offer? Is it a new angle of looking at it? Is it a new style of looking at it? What exactly do you want to offer to the particular viewer? Let's say, for example, when we were in Mysore, we used to click Mysore Palace. Like almost every one of us has taken photograph of Mysore Palace. But when we come back and we analyze each other's photograph, there will be some photographs that will really hit us hard, and we'll be like, wow, this angle was really nice. It's not like that we were not there, we were there, but maybe the photographer has understood the subject in a much deeper way, because of which he could explore that particular angle from which he could take the photograph, which maybe me or my friends could not. So the angle and understanding of the particular building is required, and what you want to showcase to your audience or to your client, that is also required. You spend a considerable amount of time mulling over the scene and environment. Anytime you go for architecture photograph, you just don't go click, click, click. You have to spend some time. You need to know the special characteristics. You know, these days we are lucky that we are into digital world. We can take as many photographs as we can. Um, uh, Talk about decades ago, we did not have this digital photography. All we had was real films, and roll films has to have some 36 films, and you have to cover, let's say, the entire photography in that. So then you have to really choose what you want to showcase in those 36 frames, because in those 36 frames itself you have to showcase your entire project. So in that way, it used to be, people used to be really choosy. These days we go all click, 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 and then we can come back and edit it and delete the things that we don't require. But still, it is much better to understand what we want to click and then go about it, rather than click and then decide what we want to keep. This also means that your camera doesn't need focus or speed. As I said, the building isn't moving anywhere, so you do not need speed or telephoto lens. Speed, or you don't have to worry about the shutter speed and things like that. All you have to worry about is how do you want to represent the building, or how do you want people to see that particular building to, you know, get inspired, or for the building to look nice. This is one of the photograph. It's called Lake Grass. You can write it down. This was one of the first photograph in 1826. We are talking about 200 years ago. Ignore the resolution because that's all the camera they had that time. But this also is an architecture photograph. So the medium has remained popular right from 1820s, 200 years to even today. And today the medium is getting even more attracted day by day, because new and new subjects are coming up. And the basic need of architecture photography is to realize that buildings just don't provide us shelter. It uh, it's a piece of art. It's more than that. Sometimes building does have an impact on the society, on the culture, and a lot of time it is required. A lot of social reforms happens when there are different kind of buildings comes up, and vice versa. So architecture photography does have an impact on them. The architecture needs to be recorded of time. uh, it has to be celebrated, hence architecture photography is required. But one thing that you need to focus more than the camera and the lens is the composition, because since the building isn't moving or the things around it are not dynamic, the only thing that you have in your hand is the composition, or the basic arrangement that you have to showcase the particular building in a best way. Now, this was one photograph by Raghu Rai. Now, Raghu Rai is one of our India's most influential photographer. You can follow him and see his work. He is into portrait photography and street photography, but he does click some really beautiful, amazing, architecture photography. So this can be outdoor or indoor. Usually we use wide lens for it. I'll talk about what exactly is wide lens when we are talking about in the second module, about the type of lenses and things like that. Uh, we will talk about editing and what are the things that we will require in this particular style of photography. So just to sum up, what exactly you require for architecture photography is: one, to choose the location properly where you want to click. Second, to know your subjects properly before you start clicking. Third, to click the building in different times of the day, because the building in the photographs, the building changes with time. You take the photograph in the morning, the palace will look different. You take the particular photograph in evening, it will look different. So you need to experiment with different time, and always try to look at it from a new perspective. Do not just go in a, although sometimes eye level are the best angles to take photographs, but do not always go by eye level. Mix it up, try different angles, try to showcase things that are not seen to a normal person in a normal time. So always try that. um, One of the things that my students keep doing is they take out the human from the photograph, and they are like, sir, the building is important that we want to see. But understand, the building is nothing until and unless you have the human in it. And it's on not only because they need the human to do the composition, but also because they provide the sense, they provide the sense of scale. So always try to include some people in an architecture photograph. Never take a photograph without a this is going to look something like this, although it's a brilliant photograph, but still because of no human, it doesn't catch our attention for long. So now I'm just going to run over few of the most famous photographer, architecture photographer, and we will try to just see. I'll be silent and just see the photographs, and then I'll just tell you the kind of principles that they have kept handy to take photographs like this. Although we will talk about architecture photographs tips and tricks in the module 3 when we are talking about compositional skills, but for now just learn the few things that they are stressing upon. Now, when we look at all of these photographs right from here, you could see that certain of these photographers have some principles that they are using. All right, you over here you can see repetition in terms of the shadow of that particular. Sorry, in terms of the reflection of that particular building. Same over here. Over here you can see some other principles also. You can see balance. You can see symmetry, right? Again, classic example of symmetry being used in architectural photography. Symmetry, balance, emphasis, patterns, showing the patterns, repetitions, patterns again, emphasis, symmetry, symmetry, balance. You will see most of these photographers are using the actual principles that we have already learned from form, space, and order by decades. We have learned the principles of design, and most of the designs are actually, most of the principles that we have already seen are being used in the photograph. That is why I said you already have the base for architecture photography. All you need is to get creative and start realizing things when you're looking at photographs. Now, imagine this particular photographs or this particular photographs. He or she might not have been able to take this photograph in this beautiful photograph until and unless they actually spend some time over it. Then they realized, okay, fine, they have the similar kind of grandeur. So what if I take a photograph which showcases something with a repetition, or sorry, something with a a balance or a symmetry? Maybe I'll be able to showcase the grandeur of that particular architecture. So for this, you need to have an eye towards this. You need to understand the building, you need to understand the nitty-gritties of the building. Then you then understand what principles can you actually use from the principle of design to actually make it a good. Now these are the tricks that you can do to make any building look pretty. So do try this out until and unless you practice these things, and you need not have to go out. I mean, in this pandemic, I really don't want you guys to go out, but all you can do is, even being at home, start taking photographs of your interior. Sometimes, architecture photography doesn't mean that it has to be outdoor, it can be indoor also. Just take photographs, and take photographs of your room, because that's one thing that you have been living in. You know that. Now see how creative can you get with that. That can be a really great exercise to understand how creative mind, or what kind of creative eye do you have, and to um, improvise it. So the last, we are towards the last module. I'll just take, I think we have 10 minutes left, and we'll have just 5 minutes for this. And we will talk about what exactly is photojournalism. Now, till now, whatever we spoke about the introduction of photography, spoke about the genres of photography, spoke about every characteristics that a particular genre has, the kind of characteristics that we are looking for. When we are talking about photojournalism, the whole ball game is different. Now, it's not focusing just on photography, but it is also focusing on the story that it has to say. Especially when you are talking about photojournalism, when you are clicking photographs of a particular event. Let's say, for example, the particular scene that is on your screen is a photojournalist called James, who's on a duty for some kind of genocide that's happening in 1994, and you can see the other people are lying down and sleeping. uh, but this guy, he wants to capture the photograph. He wants to capture the photograph because that particular happening, or what's happening at that point, can be best shown by the photograph. So that is what photojournalism is. So is it journalism plus photography? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. When we talk about journalism, it's about reporting about something. When you talk about photography, it's about documenting something. So photojournalism is what? The basic objective of photojournalism is to tell a story better than a text or a write-up that usually accompanies with photographs. So basically, if you want to know what photojournalism is, it's basically saying a story through a photograph. So now a photograph is a very small thing to tell. A photograph is just three things. I mean, if just one or two photographs cannot tell a whole story, but sometimes when you look at some photographs, it does give you a lot of view. It does give you a lot of insight of it. So that is what photograph journalism is all about. Now, according to Miriam, the photography is defined as the art or process of taking pictures with a camera. And on the other hand, the photojournalism is defined as using photographs to report news stories. So that is what photojournalism is all about. Where did it start from? It actually started as war photography. The photojournal, the whole story, because before there were no TVs, no things like that, no internet. So the only way to understand or to know what's happening in the war, especially during World War One and World War Two, was through photojournalism, because there used to be this photographer who used to click on photographs on the during the war, and used to, that used to get circulated. So that used to tell the story of what's happening in the war, or what the pain of the soldier, or about the refugees and things like that. So this all started with actually just war photography, the photojournalism. Today, photojournalism has gone deep into almost every aspect, even in architecture. I will talk about it. So, towards the second 19th century, this would expand beyond war and disaster. Before, photojournalism was actually seen as the media to showcase war, to showcase disaster, and to showcase pain, because that used to transfer a lot of things. Just by one photograph, you can transfer a lot of stories into it. But slowly, this moved to feature journalism. Now, feature photojournalism is what we use today in architecture. There are other types of photojournalism also. There is something known as sports photojournalism, there is portrait photojournalism. But what we are looking into in terms of, let's say, for example, if there is something that is bothering you, if there is something that you want to convey to the people, if there is some story you want to tell people about it, and you want to click a photograph which conveys the best thing about it, feature photojournalism is the way. So it basically involves human interest activities like art exhibition, movies, business news, science and technologies, architecture. It is creative job for photographers that they can use, different photographic techniques to connect to the audience. So you can now photography, learning photography was one part of it. Learning photojournalism is another part of it. Photography, you need to have a clear master under control over photography to get into photojournalism, because then you are getting yourself into an added responsibility of sharing a, a story also, not just a photograph but also a story. So just to get started, you need to focus on few things. So I'll just give you four just basic tips that can get you started with photojournalism. One is focus on the main idea of the photo that has been taken. Always focus on the main idea. Second, it's not bad to add a little details, and photojournalism really need not be pretty all the time. You do not have to make it pretty. Photojournalism, the focus is on the subject, the focus is on what you want to convey and how good have you conveyed it. It doesn't matter if the photo is pretty or not. In fact, some of the best photojournalism photographs from war are not pretty at all, but they convey the feeling, they convey this emotion, they tell a story. That is what makes them a great photo journalist, basically the work of a best photojournalist. The next one is to check grammar and spelling mistakes whenever you are typing the caption in a photojournalism. The caption matters a lot. How you have, because you will have just one sentence or two sentences to tell in a photojournalism produce. So when you are producing the photographs, you just write one sentence. That sentence need to have that impact. It has to be, so make sure that there are no grammatical errors and things like that, because that will just take the whole attention to your grammar studies rather than the photograph that you have done. And never be factious, never, just don't be factious about it. So I think that will be the module one. I'll just give you the final tips. The first thing is experiment with your capture. Do not just go by whether the picture looks good or not. Try experimenting. Try experimenting with simple objects, maybe a glass full of water, maybe oranges, maybe apple, your room, anything and everything. Take photograph, take portraits of your family members, those them, those are the people you understand the most. So try with that. Experiment with your captures. At the same time, don't be too hard on yourself. If your photographs are not coming out really nice, doesn't matter. It will take time for you to grow that eye, and it will be fine with time. So you need to take your time for this kind of this is an art form. You obviously need time to master it. Don't be afraid to share your photographs. You can have Instagram these days, it's very easy. You can have Instagram, Facebook, social medias. Email it to your friends, tell them, and also take criticism. Tell them what you like about the photograph, what you don't like about the photograph. That's the best way a photographer can grow, is by sharing the photograph. And explore new ideas with your photography. And just like architecture, build yourself a portfolio. Photograph portfolio will tell you your progress. How good are you how good are you, how good you were, and if you are improving or not. And also maybe 10 years, 20 years back, when you look at your first photographs, you'll understand what were the things that were there at that point of time that you were focusing on, and now how have you grown yourself as a photographer. So that's all. Before I end this session, I'll have a small quiz for you guys, just 3 questions, just to know if you guys have actually, not slept off. So the first thing is, while taking a photo at a gig, where things are changing rapidly, what mode do you think you should use in your camera? These are the things that I'm just asking, very simple questions. While taking a photo, you can just type your answer on the Zoom platform. I think we'll be able to see. You can just text your thing on the Zoom platform, and we'll be able to see. Um, is it one second? This one. Is it sports? Is it manual? Is it aperture? Or is it macro? Uh, is Rohit online? Rohit, are you online?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Rohit, can you just see, because I'm not able to go back to the particular Zoom, can you just see
Sir, we have three answer. Everybody who's answering saying sports photography.
sports photography, sports? Okay. Um, no, you are not right, guys. The answer is actually manual, because in a gig it's not just the speed that the things are working on, it's also the light that's changing. So you don't know when it's going to get dark, you don't know when they are going to open the floodlight and everything is going to get brighten up. So you need a complete control over your camera, just not on the speed. Although speed is there, but you will require manual but not sports. You will require sports only if you are talking about the speed. But in a gig or in a rock band show, lights are changing, the lights coming into your photo, your camera sensor, they are changing. So yeah, things are changing pretty fast. You will require a manual mode. Let's go to the next. The kind of photograph that you can see right now on your screen, what do you think it is? Is it a macro? Is it a sports? Is it a wildlife? Or is it a portrait? Let's see your answer. Surya says macro. Okay. Rohit says macro. Lijo says macro. Yes. Yeah, you guys are correct. So it's basically macro photography where you are focusing on things that are actually not seen to the naked eyes. We are going really deep into the subject and clicking something of its characteristics that are usually not seen to naked eyes, or we do not perceive the eye like that. And that is why it's so beautiful or it's so interesting to look at. So it's macro. Next one is a photo composition refers to the arrangement of elements in a photograph. Is it true or false? Photo composition refers to the arrangement of elements in a photograph. True or false? Let's see your answer. Lezo says true. Jivita says true. Okay, the names are going really fast, so I'm not able to read all of it. Sanjita says true. A Lakshmi Priya says true. Yes, you guys are correct. So I'm pretty sure that you guys were attentive throughout the class. So it's true. It talks about the arrangement, and that is what. So this is where I'll end my class. And the next lesson that we will have, we will talk about the technicalities of cameras. We'll talk about the next lesson will be completely into the camera. So if you have your cameras, keep your cameras with you so that we'll be, you will be able to see the manuals and things like that. We will talk about how to get started with the basic lens, what are the lenses that are available, what are the cameras that are available, and then we will go into the technicalities, the mechanics, that is the ISO, shutter speed, aperture, and we will just see in the photo editing also, although these days it has become mandatory to edit photographs, what are the things that are there that we have to use, and what are the things we should not do in a photo editing. I mean, the boundary that we have, whether we should use it or not. So with this, I'll end my today's class. That's all for module 1, and I will see you guys next on the next Monday when we will talk about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amit. Today, there have not been questions coming in, but I think they will take some time to think about the question they would like to ask. Anyway, you will be with us for another 2 sessions. Okay.
Yes,
And so I think maybe next week we'll start by 9:15 so that, before 11 we can finish, because they'll have another schedule after that. Okay.
sure,
Yeah?
ma'am. We'll start
Yeah.
by 9:15,
Okay,
and
then.
I'll keep another 10 to 15 minutes for them to ask me questions.
Yes,
also.
please. Yes, that would be great. Thank you so much. Thanks, students. See you all
Thank you.
next week. Thank you.